Welcome to the Dropping into Power podcast, where we'll be hearing stories about the transformational power of surfing from women surfers of all ages, all levels, and all over. We'll hear about courage, commitment, struggles, frustration, epiphany, and, of course, life transformations large and small. I'm your host, Sheila Gallion, and I am stoked to share these conversations with these amazing women full of so much passion with all of you. Aloha. Thank you so much for joining us on the Dropping into Power podcast. I had a little bit of a hiatus, and I'm super excited to come back. And I'm interviewing today Elizabeth Sneed, the Curvy Surfer Girl. Do you actually go by Curvy Surfer Girl, or you're the founder of the Curvy Surfer Girl movement?
I go by both.
And I found you just kind of by accident, seeing you post things. Maybe it was in a Facebook group, but you just caught my eye. So much joy, so much passion, and such an important story. So I'm going to read a little more of your bio for people that aren't familiar with you on Instagram. Although in your bio, you mentioned 24,000 Instagram followers in 9 months, but I see 71,000 now.
Yeah,
on Instagram.
I need to update this.
So this is a real number. I mean, it's so inspiring. So the Curvy Surfer Girl movement is dedicated to reimagining the last 63, I would add plus years of exclusive history in women's surfing. Hawaii surfer Elizabeth Sneed recognized the need for women to have a community dedicated to surfing that was representative of modern and diverse women athletes. Woohoo! Elizabeth's personal journey of accepting herself as a plus-size athlete over the last, I think it's 5 years now, was the catalyst that launched the movement. And in the summer of 2020, Elizabeth partnered with Tommy Peruki, a world-class surf photographer of Oahu's South Shore, to launch the first images of a plus-size female surfer via Instagram. That is really unbelievable. And Curvy Surfer Girl continued to grow as a movement and community through Instagram, amassing 24,000 women in 9 months, which is insane, now up to 71,000. A resounding indication by women worldwide for more and better representation in women's surfing. And I know you've recently partnered with Jolynn on a clothing and I think upcoming wetsuit line, which is so amazing and so important. I mean, wetsuits just, when I started surfing, were really only made for one body type. I remember I had a friend who was curvy, not even by curvy standards, just a voluptuous woman, and she could get nothing. I mean, it was so hard. So that's such an important mission. And Elizabeth has just amassed this, if there's an energy behind it and you embody it, I mean, you embody this joyfulness, and I want to hear about the joyfulness. I want to also hear about the not so joyfulness, just, all the stuff that comes with surfing, period. And that has had these extra layers from having these extra challenges. It's enough. I've talked to a lot of women who, especially women my age in their 50s, who just never saw women surfing, period. So, that was just not even in the concept. So when you don't see yourself doing something, and then I've talked to women of color, a woman from the Philippines who, never saw herself surfing, another woman who was Hawaiian mix, but didn't grow up in Hawaii, never saw herself surfing. When you don't see yourself, you don't imagine yourself doing it, unless you're there's the occasional complete visionary that somehow just puts themselves there no matter what, which is a little bit of your story, I think, in this way. Although Hawaiian women, as you know, are not tiny women. And the Hawaiian women, the surfers of old, these were not tiny people. That is a coveted and appreciated quality in Hawaiian women, and was associated with regality, to be a larger woman. And those women ripped, there's some amazing surfers.
Queen Kaahumanu on, Hawaii Island, where you are, was a renowned surfer, and she was very much plus size in today's sizing considerations. So yeah, I mean, that colonialism has a lot to play in women's role within surf culture. Because in Hawaiian and Polynesian culture, it definitely did not discriminate the way that colonialist culture did. I mean, colonists almost wiped out surfing completely from Native Hawaiian culture. So if it wasn't for, the rebels that continued the tradition, we wouldn't even know of surfing's existence at this point. And It was actually Princess Ka'iolani was one of the people that led the resurgence of it, which was prior to Duke. And then, Duke became world famous for his Olympic swimming, and then synonymous with surfing as well. So a lot of history comes into play with what I'm doing, and especially doing here in Hawaii. Hawaiian history and colonialist history, right at that turn of the century in the 1800s, that has a huge role in how surfing interfaced with the rest of the world over the next 200 years, which brings us up to present day, and where the Curvy Surfer Girl movement started. And I always like to talk about the historical aspects because, people in the very beginning, when I started Curvy Surfer Girl, they asked me a lot and frequently, why don't we see more curvy women in the ocean surfing and doing things in general? And you really have to understand the history of colonialism to get to why surf culture looks and is what it is today, and so there's a lot that goes into that question that people aren't even aware of.
And that dawn of advertising too, that starting from the time of Duke and, when they started selling Hawaii, as a tourist location with the postcards and the women of certain shapes and forms. And then that whole iconography developed, though they were a little more Zoftig, back then, but it just got thinner and thinner, over the years.
Right.
And then Gidget and, all the commercialization, just this whole image that's been projected. I think, this whole stick girl thing is pretty small sliver of time, in history in terms of
absolutely,
but associating beauty with freedom, with strength, these have all been mixed mashed over the millennia in different versions, to extreme limitations, to moments of, we have the Amazons, it all feels very related to me in some way, that this birth of this, this rebirth that's going on for now with surfing, in particular with women, it's happened to a lot of people. I heard a crazy statistic, like 3 million people started surfing over COVID. I don't know if that's actually true. That's a really big number. But in particular, what I notice is the growth in women surfing, because when I started surfing, just in the beginning of 2000, the ratio was teeny, very, very few women. And there's still certain breaks where you don't see any women or very few women. And a lot of times I don't see a lot of women out where I surf, but the numbers, it's exploded. And I believe it has to do with personal power, which is why this podcast is about that, really. And not the people that grew up surfing, because that's kind of a different story for them, but the women who are literally finding this fountain of something within them, and this incredible calling that is bringing us like to the water together to do this thing. It's an individual thing, it's a collective thing. So you had said when we chatted yesterday, this, that part of your mission is to, help women understand they don't have to be extraordinary to surf. So what's so important, do you think, about them understanding that? And what is it that you want them to find in the water?
Well, I feel like when you go on Instagram, Facebook, any form of media on the internet, the female surfers that are shared with the world are top tier athletes. They are in the Olympics now for surfing. They are sponsored, and they truly are extraordinary human beings, and they're extremely accomplished athletes. But that's really all you see. If you Google surfer girl, or you're looking at female surfers, that is 90% of the images on the internet. And what happens is, when we present that idea of what a female surfer is to the world, then people compare themselves to it, and they automatically say, well, that's not for me. I can't do that. I will never be able to accomplish those things. And I guess that's only for a select few people who grow up with the perfect life. And that's really how it felt to me when I would look at surf culture through the lens of, how it's presented to the world. I never would have imagined like I could have even surfed. I mean, I grew up in Northeast Texas, and when I did get older and I learned that, surfing existed, before I really was in Hawaii and in a coastal community, to me, surfing was just like unattainable. It was inaccessible for somebody like me. I didn't think that people, really outside of taking like one or two surf lessons, even entertained the idea of being a surfer as an adult because the way it's presented. And so when I became a surfer, and then eventually through time, as I developed Curvy Surfer Girl, one of the things that I wanted to tackle was the image problem. And not just from a body image perspective, but also from a skill perspective, because we really do not see women in the beginner to intermediate realms surfing in broad mainstream media surf culture. Right. And I think it is very unfortunate because so many women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond can be surfing and can make this extraordinary, amazing tradition part of their life, if only they even had an inkling that it was possible for them. So I wanted to tear down some of that pretentiousness, that elitism that has been so woven into surf culture from the public's perspective, and say, hey, I'm using myself as an example, who is not an Olympic level athlete, and I'm plus size and I can surf, and I learned how to do it at 26. I mean, that's just shy of 30 years old. All right. And I'm not saying that this is old, but if you're in a coastal community, that is old to learn how to surf. Right. And you maybe won't understand that if you're, middle America, like I used to be. But coming into surf culture at nearly 30 is definitely something that's intimidating. And it makes you question whether or not you should be doing it, because this is not, once again, something that you see people doing. You don't see someone learning an extremely difficult sport at almost 30 years old. And you definitely don't see someone with my body type doing it. So that was an important thing for me, was to show the progression and to show that, you can be an average Jane Doe off the street. And if you have the right attitude, dedication, and heart, you can absolutely become a surfer. And it's very accessible and possible for you, really, at any age. I still get people that ask me, like, well, how old, is the right age to start learning or pick it up? And I'm like, any age. My friend
Jeannie, 67. Jeannie, give a call out to Jeannie, who's been on this podcast. I was 36. I knew people in their 40s. There are different challenges and different, one thing, I want to just make this observation because it's interesting. I really appreciate what you're talking about in the whole perspective of surfing seeming so elitist, alienated, because I did grow up in California and I grew up where people surfed, and I grew up in the ocean. I didn't surf because I had this weird attitude, like I just want to body surf. I want to be one with the ocean.
I love that though.
And then the surfers were mostly boys, and they kind of had this little attitude, and I just didn't, wasn't drawn to it back then. But I never sat with that perspective, what it must really look like, completely from the middle of the country. And I've lived in Texas too, but I'd already lived in the ocean by then. But how it would seem so inaccessible. And I want to come back in a minute to like what that secret sauce is, like what's so important. I think what you're speaking to in a way is there are many people who there is this rumbling, there's a calling, there's something, I don't know if we're born with it, but those of us called to the ocean, we're called. It's called to learn to surf. And that is the one thing. I think it's the one thing you do require to learn how to surf. You can be any age, you can be any body type, but you have to have that thing, that calling. And I think for many of us, it's, we talked a little bit of this about like trauma bonding, or trauma healing. And I don't really know what it is, if it's ancestral, if it's energetic, if it's like from the gills, from the stars. I don't know what it is, but something in literally our beings and DNA just aches for this thing and needs it. And so this gateway that you've opened is so spectacular, just this whole thinking like, I am called and I now have a pathway. And I love talking about the struggles along the way and the joy. So what was going on? You had shared, and I didn't get a chance to listen to that podcast, but you shared that you were on a podcast, and we'll put it in the notes, that really talked about this near drowning experience you had at 14, which is really fascinating and compelling and a huge part of what you've had to overcome.
Yeah.
But what I want to ask you about now is what was really going on in your life at the time that you finally, this thing that was bubbling in, like what was going on and where was it in your body? How did you recognize that call? How did it motivate you? Like, what was that story?
So to the audience, what Sheila is referencing is I really felt a magnetism to go towards and in the ocean. And so I'll try to summarize this as best as I can. I was 14 years old on the Gulf Coast on a humanitarian relief trip for Hurricane Katrina. I get dragged out into the middle of the ocean, nearly drowned to death. I am rescued, make it back to shore, more or less develop a form of PTSD around the ocean. And when I say I was terrified of the ocean, it's genuinely an understatement. Like I would go into full body shakes, cry, wouldn't even go near a large body of water after that experience at 14. And so fast forward to I was 21 years old. I was in college. One of my life dreams growing up in these landlocked places like Texas and Arizona, where I spent my entire life for the most part, was I wanted to see a place with bright blue water. And ever since I was a little girl, there were a handful of places on my dream list. It was New York, Alaska, and Hawaii. And I don't know where this came from. It's just always been inside of me. I wanted to see those three places since I had consciousness. And so in college, I jumped on a plane solo and just decided I'm going to go see Hawaii. It's a now or never kind of a thing. If I don't get to it at some point, it may not happen for me. So my mom was a flight attendant. I, hitched a ride as a non-rev, get to Hawaii. And the moment I was in eye line of the islands, I had a very spiritual experience, and I touched down on the island, and there was just this knowing, mind, body, soul connection, that this is where I was meant to be. This is why I was put on this earth, was to be in these islands, and this was my home. And I don't know how you explain that to somebody. I guess you just have to live your life, and you either experience it or you don't. When I got towards closer to the beach, I just felt this very strong physical sensation that I needed to be in and near and around the ocean. And it was actually really remarkably powerful. So growing up my whole life, and I don't really talk about this on podcasts too often because it's a little bit of a hard thing if you've never experienced it to comprehend, but growing up in large landmass states like Texas, I have never felt the ocean and the effects on a body of land or on my physical body. And when I was in Hawaii on Oahu for the first time, I could actually feel the energy pulling on the island. And I don't really know how to describe it. I may have just had, because I don't feel that anymore, and I've really never felt it since. It was kind of like a one-off thing, but I would wake up with the tide changes.
Wow.
And I didn't even know that was happening, because every time I would feel it while I was on this, this first trip to Hawaii, I would go to the beach because I would just be literally pulled out of my sleep. And the Beach Boys are on the beach at all times of day, night, they're beach boys. That's their whole life, is the ocean. And I would always go out when I felt these tide shifts, and I didn't know what it was. Like I said, I was just pulled out of a dead sleep most of the time. And the Beach Boys started recognizing the pattern. And they were like, Elizabeth, every time the tide changes, you come to the ocean.
Oh, wow.
They're like, are you timing this? And I'm like, no, there's like a magnetism in my chest, and it's really powerful and it's really strong. And it literally is like sucking me towards it.
Wow.
And they all looked at each other like, this chick is on some other level. And I'm like, no, but I can really feel the energy forces working, like physics. I can feel the energy forces from the ocean pulling on my human body and pulling on the island, the land of the island. And like I said, I've never felt it since. It was really only that first trip that I had this sensitivity. And so you take all of that and then you combine it with my body just yearning and pulling me into it. And I was terrified. I didn't know how to deal with these feelings, these emotions, the desire to be in the ocean, but also be completely petrified of it at the same time. And so I kind of concocted this strategy that I would ask the Beach Boys to take me out on a surfboard so that I was protected from drowning. I had a surfboard, which was a flotation device. And then I had, the Beach Boys, who are lifelong islanders that are the most expert watermen in the world. So I'm like, well, between the surfboard and the Beach Boy, my chances of dying in the ocean are pretty small now.
Yeah.
They were the ones that introduced me to surfing. And from the moment I caught my first ever wave, it was like I connected with the source of the whole universe. And it was the most, it was just the most beautiful, transforming moment of my whole existence. And from that moment, my life was never the same. I knew my purpose was to move to Hawaii, was to learn to connect and be with the ocean through surfing, through free diving, through any means I could. And that's what I did. I followed through on that dream, and I'm living it now.
Did you go back and finish college?
I did.
Did you? Okay. And
that was why it took so long from 2012 to 2017, to get back. But every day I was gone, after I had to leave that first time, I mean, I've never felt homesick in my life. I've never been connected to any real place, like emotionally, spiritually. I've just kind of been like, yeah, I'm floating around here or whatever. But after I visited Hawaii for the first time, I felt homesick every day. And you can ask people that knew me during that period of my life. Like, all I talked about was Hawaii. My screensavers were Hawaii. My calendars were Hawaii. Everything was Hawaii. And then finally I got the opportunity to come and live here.
That's amazing. That is a really powerful story. And I had a sense there was some kind of serious secret sauce in there,
I don't know. I mean, it's very real. It's very genuine. And I know it's a little bit out there. And, if I heard someone say something similar, it's a lot to process that the ocean can have that kind of a effect on the human body, the mind, and the spirit. But I mean, if you really think about it, even from a scientific perspective, all life on Earth comes from the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
All of it. Like from the microorganisms that the Earth started with to us now. It all began in the ocean.
There's a growing body of research about the effect of the ocean on human beings, and part of what's fueling the, surfer healing, I wouldn't call it revolution, but there's such a big movement of surfers for healing. There's a certification program that's getting really close to actually doing, surf therapy through a certified process. The results are powerful and anecdotal now, but, they're actually trying to find a way to codify the information. It's difficult to quantify because you can't make exact replicas of each situation. The waves are different, the weather's different, the days are different, but the International Surf Therapy Organization, they're working on it. I interviewed the CEO of that organization. So it's powerful. And I think anybody listening to this podcast understands, could totally relate to exactly what you're saying. I've talked to, in different forms, maybe not in such a specific really visceral way that, so you sort of have that really measuring way. But, I grew up loving the ocean, being called to the ocean, swimming in the ocean. And then I was away from the ocean for a long time. In fact, I lived in Texas for 6 years. And towards the end of it, I literally was writing poetry to the ocean, like not about the ocean. I mean, it was like, I was in pain. Like it was a yearning that was indescribable. When I finally got to move back, the first time I saw it, and I was in the middle of a divorce or separation, and I drove and I saw the Pacific Ocean, and I said, I will never live out of sight of the Pacific Ocean again. And I never have.
That's so beautiful.
You know,
and that makes my heart happy to hear that for you.
It's
so powerful. It's such a tragedy when ocean people, when ocean is in your heart, when it's in your soul, when I don't know how we get it in us, because for all I know, you know, generations of my families have been in landlocked places. But I don't know, it gets in us somehow. I mean, we're all connected to the ocean, no matter where on the planet you are. You could be in the Sahara. The ocean still has such a profound effect on the planet, on space, on everything, that it's still connected, and somehow it gets in certain ones of us.
Yes.
And I think and it really breaks my heart, because if you're an ocean soul and you don't get to be by the ocean, it is probably one of the biggest tragedies of your life. Well, and I hope that anyone that is an ocean soul is united with the ocean. I really hope and pray that for anybody that listens to this, because we both know, Sheila and I both know, the pain of having to be away from it when that's inside of you.
It's true. And it's really hard to explain. It's hard to explain sometimes to people. You know, my life and my world, you may look at it, somebody may look at me, you know, and everyone has their different ways of assessing success, or, you know, whether or not you fit or whether or not you've accomplished this. But I got to surf this morning, and I got to drive down, and it was crystalline, beautiful. I saw the reef through the ocean, and my BFF was there. I mean, oh my gosh, I'm the most successful person I know.
I agree. I literally agree.
I even caught a couple of lefts, you know, and did one good turn, you know, and that doesn't always happen. But, and I think it's important for us to reinforce, you know, it for ourselves and each other, just how critical and crucial it is. And I feel a calling to really figure out how to serve the ocean, and how to serve Hawaii in particular, how to really, you know, amplify this feeling of humility and love and gratitude, and, you know, that we get to experience for, you know, being a part of it. And, you know, it's not always easy, figuring out how to embrace that when you're not Indigenous, and figure out how to speak about it in authentically, and without, you know, sounding like a colonizer. You know, these are all things we're facing, some of us, you know?
Yeah, so no, absolutely. That is a struggle, and that's not even something I've ever talked about. But I will say, it's ironic that you bring this up, like service to the ocean and service to Hawaii, because that is something that we share. That ideology, that mindset, that philosophy, that heart of service. And I'll tell you, this is another little bit of a woo-woo moment in my life, but it's an actual fact. And this is what happened. When I lost my job, and I, you know, was like, okay, I could be destitute now with the pandemic. I mean, it can get really bad in Hawaii when you're unemployed. I was like, you know, the only place I know to go is the ocean. It's the only place of refuge I have at this point to provide any sort of respite from the absolute despair I was in from losing my job. So I paddle out to the ocean, and I'm having a full-on breakdown in the water that day. I'm crying. I'm out. Nobody can see me. I'm literally in the middle of the ocean, far out on the outer breaks. And I just get off my board, and I start praying to the ocean. And my prayer to the ocean was, please allow me to be with you as often as possible for a cause greater than myself, in service to the ocean and to others. Please help me find whatever path allows me to do that. Wow. And I just sat there and I repeated that prayer over and over, and I physically spoke to the water. And when I got out of the water, and it's emotional to even talk about sometimes, but when I got out of the water, I that's when Curvy Surfer Girl, that was when I saw it, and that was when it happened. And Curvy Surfer Girl is a gift that the ocean gave to me to bring to the world. And it could have been anybody, but the ocean blessed me and selected me and chose me to bring that idea. And every day I'm Curvy Surfer Girl. It's just a reflection of my love and that relationship I have with the ocean, because I really believe that was a gift from the water to me, and it was connected to my purpose in life.
Oh God, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that, really, and just deeply. I just feel it all the way. And it comes through. And I love you getting to talk about it for a second and let it settle.
So one of my personal heroes, other than Duke Hanamoku, is Joseph Campbell. And if you don't know who Joseph Campbell is, he was one of the great academic and philosophical mythologists of the last generation. And he talks about when you are in pursuit of your bliss, that is when the universe unlocks all of its secrets and opens all of the doors that used to be locked. And that's really all I did, is I just went to the place that brings me the most joy. And I was so connected to it and still am. And I just asked to continue to live in that presence where I was whole. And I don't really think that even I fully comprehend how something like this could have unraveled the way it has, the way it's been received by the entire world, the people of the community that are part of Curvy Surfer Girl. I mean, yourself, like, you're a very beautiful, loving, deep, compassionate person. And it's like 71,000 versions of you every single day. Like, you couldn't win the lottery and have better luck and be this blessed to be surrounded by that many beautiful souls every day by simply doing what you love in the ocean. It's just
so amazing.
To me, it is the most divine intervention thing. It's a genuine miracle that I get to do this. And I, like, every day is the best day of my life.
And the thing about it is that there's no limit to how many versions of this kind of beauty and service could be born.
Exactly.
Because everything is unique. So I didn't share this with you when we chatted this, but what originally inspired me to start doing this podcast is I wrote a movie called Dropping In. And it is about a woman who always stays in the beginner zone. She never gets good, but she literally transforms her whole life through surfing. And I wrote it when I first started surfing in 2001. It almost got made in 2008, and it's back. I rewrote it. Did a page 1 rewrite in 2019 with a whole different perspective. I changed a lot of things and it came back to life. We just got a director on board. I have a producer. It's moving along, and it's very much this, it's just uplifting. It's just empowering. It's just a story about finding your voice and finding your own strength. She learns how to just listen to her body and kind of find her moment and that balance between committing and taking care of yourself. So I was curious, are people interested in stories of personal transformation and surfing? That was so I started this podcast with that question, like, are people interested? And what I found, like, now I haven't had 73,000, but
that's okay.
You're number 11 of the most amazing, inspiring, powerful, beautiful women whose lives have been, lit up by surfing. And when we talk about it and we feel it, and there's literally a coming to the center. And for some people, it's about surfing in community. For some people, it's about surfing by themselves, but it's just coming back home. It's like the mermaids are coming home and we got some stuff going on, and it's,
I love this.
It's this rising, whenever I talk to somebody on the podcast and you are so focused in on it, like it's so powerful. Like, yeah, this is how we, it can sound self-serving to talk about following your bliss, but you're talking about healing, you're talking about joy, you're talking about equality, you're talking about inclusion, you're talking about this being experienced. One of the things I love about the surf therapy movements going on now is they're working so much on inclusion. They're dealing with people with addiction problems, incarcerated people of, really underprivileged communities, getting them into the water. Because even if you don't become a surfer, getting that connection, we're so isolated from nature. We're so isolated from that power and that connection within ourselves. And I think your experience with the tides, I think that's going to resonate with so many people that suddenly feel like, oh, I have felt something like that. I felt the breath of an oak tree. I felt some of these particular were water people, but I have a thing for oak trees. But
I love trees too.
Yeah. My daughter laughs at me. I'm pretty woo woo. Like, I've heard them, she laughs at me. I'm like, well, that one told me its name. She's like, oh God, Mom. So they don't always tell me their name. But that, that reminder to all of us from wherever we're coming from, that this is not weird at all. Actually, we are of nature. There's been kind of a whole movement to make us think otherwise, but why would we not feel totally connected with whatever, we're going to have kind of different, whether you call them totems or amakua or whatever your personal relationship is. I definitely feel the ocean is a being. It's not always
I feel the exact same way though.
I wouldn't call it always my bestie, like sometimes it just kicks my ass, but
I genuinely believe, I don't know, if anyone's listening to this and you're interested, you can go on YouTube and you can watch, there's a whole documentary about water being conscious. And there are physicists that have more or less at this point in time proven that water has a form of consciousness. And if you really extrapolate this idea out and you understand that the ocean is the source of all creation on planet Earth, then the ocean would be the original source of consciousness.
It works. And
that is a pretty profound revelation, because physicists are now exploring how that affects the natural world, human beings, what it means when we drink water, what it means, our bodies are 90% water.
And it's water and light.
70% water.
70% water, yeah.
It's really, really interesting to watch. And it's not woo-woo science at all. It's real physicists in France exploring what the concept of consciousness in water looks like. And they've done some really extraordinary experiments on it to show that water has memory. And it's just fascinating because it really makes you take a very big step back and think about what the far-reaching effects of that is and how it interplays with our experience on the earth as people, as humans,
It's so the opportunities are phenomenal. I wrote this book. Not a book. I wrote an article called How Women Surfers Can Save the World. I feel like if we could get the women from the boardroom and we need to get more people into the water, at the highest levels, and just get them in there and just see what happens. Maybe we can change some ideas, get them a little more rooted in, we need more. We need more women in charge to start with, but there are women in charge and we need to get them in the water. Let's talk about some surfing, because I love this. This has been so fun. I love talking about this, but I want to ask you some surfing questions. You're a beautiful surfer. The videos
you're
I've seen.
Very gracious, Sheila.
No, you are. You have, like, I could just feel your joy and, connection. And, it's not about the tricks. So then I didn't watch all your videos, but I watched them. I could see the connection and the love and the joy and the grace. And, you're a beautiful surfer. And I know there's, yes. And the first thing you say is, because we live in Hawaii, right? We live
exactly
of surfing, and you're just going to feel like a kook no matter what in this area.
The skill of surfers here is no less than prolific.
Yeah. If you just want to feel humbled constantly, you can just go to pretty much any break in Hawaii and be like, okay, I will never be even like 100th of that, but that's okay because I have joy and I have, this, passion, and that shows. So I want to know from you, what is your favorite thing about your surfing?
Oh gosh, it's just the freedom. I think this is the first thing that comes to mind is freedom. It's my habitat. It's where I belong. The ocean is where I belong, and surfing is the vessel of connection to the ocean, right? It allows me an intention to be in the water. It gives me purpose. It gives me practice. It gives me incredible joy. I mean, if you do I will agree with you. If you watch me surfing, the sheer joy that radiates off of me is enormous. And in person, it's even more intense. Like, I am the biggest woo girl you will ever meet. The girl there, woo! Yeah. That's me. Like, I am wooing everybody surfing. Yeah. I'm just the happiest little human being on our planet when I get to go out there and I'm catching waves. And don't get me wrong, I mean, it's not always rainbows and sunshine, but for the most part, even when I'm having a relatively crappy day on the water, I'm still like, I look around me and I'm like, I am surrounded by turquoise blue water.
Right. It's such a great attitude. And of course, not everybody gets to surf in turquoise blue water. So we got to remember that, like, sometimes it's colder, sometimes it's darker, sometimes it's windier. But so, how do you deal with, and I want to ask you about the negative voices sort of altogether. You had such a will, you had such a calling. So, but even you, I imagine, especially in the very beginning, or tell me, it's such a part of it for women in particular. Those negative voices are so powerful from whatever they're coming from, whether it's body sensitivity or age or skill level, or somebody barks at you in the water and you deal with that. We talked about that, shaming moments. But so let's go back to the beginning for a minute. And I know that you had gone out with the Beach Boys. And then I know when you came back, you mentioned you hired surf instructors, but just sort of to help other women who are really struggling with this. What was your negative talk and how did you deal with it?
Let me tell you, if it was not for my surf instructor, Chelsea, there is no way Elizabeth Sneed would be a surfer today. The negative self-talk was absolutely overwhelming for me. Between the PTSD and the immense fear of the ocean, that was its own form, right? It was like, well, are you going to die today? Are you going to drown? You don't really know how to swim. You don't really know what the ocean's even doing. Why are you out here? Right. Like, you get you're such an idiot. What makes you think that you can do this? And then of course you get the body stuff that shows up. So right. So you get past the fear of the ocean and the fear of drowning. And then your brain just switches to the next Armageddon topic, right? And it's like, okay, well, you're a fat ass and you're not strong enough to do this. And, what made you think at 26 years old that you have any business doing this? Look at all these people around you who are glorious, who are catching every wave possible. And you're just starting at 26 and you think you've got any shot at this? This was my inner dialogue 24/7. And I can keep this going. This is just two topics. This is like body image and fear of the ocean. I mean, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And especially when it gets hard, then the voices are on full blast. It's like, oh yeah, now look at you, you idiot. Coming out to Hawaii from Arizona, you have no clue. You almost died in the ocean already. Why are you even out here? What are you doing? You think these people that you hired can really help you? And the brain is a dark place sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
And when it gets hard, I'm just saying, I mean, it's brutal. And I know that anybody that's a beginner surfer probably knows what I'm talking about, because those are very real statements that go through my brain, in the very beginning stages, and occasionally still do. But for the most part now, I've worked through rehabilitating myself with all of it, with body image, with fear of the ocean, and it takes significant work. But when it gets difficult, and I want whoever's out there to hear this, especially if you're a new surfer, when it gets hard, that's when those voices get loud and they get overwhelming. And really the best thing that you can do is sit with them and ask people to help you overcome that. Ask people to help you understand how and why you can do this. And you know what?
I love
You
that.
may not even be able to absorb it, to receive it, or to believe it for a while, but keep showing up anyways, and keep surrounding yourself. Even if it's just one person, have one person there to offset those inner voices so that you can keep pushing through the hard challenges of the beginning of surfing. Because if you don't have that, the dropout rate is pretty high because it's hard, and the brain doesn't want to do dangerous, difficult things. It's trying to find the path of least resistance, and surfing eventually may become the path of least resistance for you. But in the beginning, there will be pushback that you're going to have to overcome. So take it from me, it's going to happen, but you are capable of moving past that.
I love your solution, your recommendation. And it's sort of a relatively new phenomenon that all these surf coaches are available. Some people are very expensive. Some people are more affordable. Probably, I don't know, there's probably a way to search that out. And if it's, if you're totally broke, then it's going to be a little more challenging, but even if you can get one lesson. But what I really like is, it sounds like you got lucky with Chelsea, that you found this amazing, beautiful person. But I would also encourage people, if that's not how your instructor is showing up, fire them immediately and find a different one. Because I definitely hear from women who have dealt with these surf coaches who are kind of,
they're total misogynists.
Yeah, total misogynist. And, I had a funny story when I first started surfing. I'd been surfing like maybe a year and a half. And I don't know, I was good at some things and not at others, but I guess I seemed okay at times. So I went on this date. It was a Craigslist date. And this guy was a surfer. This was back when Craigslist, like you dated off this. It was before Facebook, right? It was a long time ago.
I remember Craigslist and all of that. I'm old enough to be part of the understanding.
Just barely, right? Yeah. So I go on this date with this guy. We meet in Venice, and we were going to surf, I think. Oh no! So we surfed. So we had breakfast and we surfed, and there just wasn't any chemistry. But he said, "Hey, you're a good little surfer girl. Do you want to help me teach this lesson afterwards?" So we taught. He had a couple. And so he taught the guy and I taught the girl, and I didn't know how to teach a surf lesson, but this poor woman was struggling with her pop-up, and the guy was so obnoxious the way he was teaching it. And finally I went up to her and I'm like, no, we're not as strong as men. We don't have their center of gravity. Like, if you need to put a knee down first. And, I just gave her this whole sort of talked about her body differently. And the next thing you know, she popped up and she, surfed and fell off. And he said to me afterwards, he's like, you know what? I'm so glad you were there, because if it had been me, she'd been crying on the beach. He would have never had the patience, the language. He had no interest. And she ended up giving me, they worked for Cirque du Soleil. And so she ended up giving me 2 tickets to Cirque du Soleil to take this guy, but I didn't take him. I took a different guy. But it was such a powerful thing, and it was so important. Like, had I not been there, that woman would have had such a different experience and such a negative experience. And I don't know if she went on to surf, but she felt good about herself and she felt proud. And if she hadn't, like he said, if I hadn't been there, like he said, she'd have been sitting crying on the beach while her boyfriend had a surf lesson. So it was really, we're tough, we're hungry, but those negative voices are big for us, so it is so important. So if you have a jerk of a surf instructor, fire them and find somebody who who wants to inspire you, because they're definitely out there.
And let me add to what Sheila's saying. If anyone as an instructor makes a comment about how your weight is negatively affecting your surfing, or even implies that passively at all, if someone is like, oh yeah, if you're a plus size gal and they're like, your weight might be preventing you from doing XYZ. Let me tell you right now, this individual is not a qualified surf instructor to work with you, because surf instructors who are very gifted, experienced, and experts in their field can teach anyone how to surf. You could be missing limbs. You could have any set of issues. You could be a 90-year-old person. You could be a child. If you have a skilled surf instructor, anyone will be able to go and surf. So if somebody is making comments about your weight or your size or your muscles or anything like that. This is a person immediately, that is a red flag. You get rid of that person because they do not have the understanding to teach you how to surf. And it's just going to end up giving you a negative life experience, which is not what any of us need.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have have you been told those things?
I have not. No, I haven't.
Good
Insanely amazing surf instructors, but Curvy Surfer Girls on my platform tell me all the time. I literally just had this happen last night. I posted my new guide for my pop-up drills yesterday, and one of the gals commented and said, I took a surf lesson with someone who said the reason why I wasn't able to get my pop-up down was because I was too heavy. And that was from a surf instructor.
Oh my gosh.
You know, so this is not, if anybody says something like that to a person, this is immediately a red flag that this is not a professional. This is someone who's hustling for money and does not understand how the biomechanics of the human body on a surfboard and in the ocean work. And you just need to, like Sheila said, fire them.
Yeah, absolutely. And look for inspiration. It probably depends on where you surf. I mean, here in Hawaii, like I said, you know, I see some beautiful longboarder ladies who are definitely, these are not tiny people, you know, and they are having no trouble surfing circles around me. Like they are popping up, they are carving, they are badass. Like, and it's definitely, that there's no truth to that. And there is truth, of course, developing strength and coordination and timing, like all of that. But I love that. That's absolutely.
Yeah, but all of that still has nothing to do with the size of your body.
Right. I love that.
I mean, there are like some of the strongest people in the world are very heavy people. And, you know, they have core strength, they have upper body strength, men and women, you know, Olympic power lifters, shot putters. These individuals are very strong individuals and they are heavier people. They are not the beauty standard.
It's just it's just such a weird, I mean, it does feel like it's getting better, but it's just such a weird way that we look at people, just all of it. You know, it's just putting everybody in little boxes and assessing what they can and can't do or should do or shouldn't do. It is just, it's just, but I love everything that's challenging all of that. And I love your work in it. And it's so good. I mean, I'm up there and, I like to tell people I started shortboarding at 54. So
I love this.
I did a little bit before, but I'm getting better, you know? And in fact, this woman told me yesterday, because I said that I was like, you know, I'm getting a little better. She's like, oh, you're one of the women that I look at as like one of the women who's just like shortboards, one of the better shortboarders. That is not what I would say. Like I can catch waves, but I can't do much once I'm on it.
See, and I feel the same way.
You know, they're hacking, throwing fins. I mean, I'm just like, okay, someday I'm going to do a floater. But, you know, but it's all, you know,
I feel identical. Perception. I'm like, I feel the exact same way you do. Anytime someone compliments my surfing or says that they, you know, use me as like a surf style inspiration, I'm like, oh, no. Like, I'm not the person to don't mimic my surfing style, you know?
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
I mean, better people to watch than that for me.
Maybe, well, you know, I'll take it like, so maybe somebody looks at me and goes, oh, no, that's accessible, you know? So that's okay.
That's true.
Maybe they could get to be like me. They can't, you know, get to be like that girl, but, but you know,
I definitely think that's what it comes down to.
Maybe that's part of it.
They feel accessible.
Yeah. So, and that works for me because I would have to have been born with it and started at 6 to get to some of those levels. And that's okay. Like, I'm so happy. Well, let's talk about, I want to hear a little bit more about your surfing. So what, do you have a moment? Is there a wave, like that first wave, that first turn, some delicious moment? Do you have a memory of like your favorite surf moment? Just maybe have more than one.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Well, I've had some real, now this, what I would qualify as woo-woo experience.
Okay.
So one of the most powerful moments of my entire surfing, it happened the first year. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So my hero for sure in life and in surfing, one of them is Duke Kahanamoku. And I've always felt very connected to Duke. I don't know how or why or what it is, but I just feel like, he's close and accessible through the ocean, because that's where he lived his entire life, was right out there in Waikiki where I surf. And he's just a very important figure in my life and on my journey. And I talk to Duke Kahanamoku out in the ocean. I know it sounds wild, but like, I just, go out there and I'm like, aloha, Duke, if you're out there, like, protect me and help me learn how to surf better. And I just feel like his spirit is still with the ocean. And he's, he was one of the original Beach Boys that taught all these tourists and different people from all walks of life how to enjoy the ocean. And so I just feel like he's still out there. And so I always recognize that eternal part of him that's connected to the ocean. And so the first year I'd moved to Hawaii, his birthday is at the end of August, Duke Kahanamoku. And, there's big festivals for him and stuff every year here on Oahu and throughout the world. And so I was just at my home break, and I knew it was his birthday. And so I dedicated my surf session to Duke. And, I said my little aloha to Duke. And I was like, Duke, like, I'm out here in the ocean today, and I'm surfing for you on your birthday. And, if you can help me get a wave or two, I'm still learning, but you're my inspiration and my hero. And, I just did a little birthday speech to the ocean and hope maybe Duke was out there somewhere and heard it. Right. This is very woo woo. Okay. I'm aware, guys, whoever's listening to this. So I know it all sounds ridiculous, but
not
that's
at all.
me.
Not at all.
So I'm out there, and I'm still, this was at a period of time where I was still very much afraid of the ocean. And so I would talk to figures like Duke in spirit to have a sense of self-preservation and safety, because, even if it was only in my head that maybe someone out there like Duke was watching over me while I was surfing, it made me feel a little bit safer and allowed me to just relax a little bit more to enjoy the experience of surfing. And so there I was out there at the break, in Waikiki at Publix, and the sun was setting, and for me, there were some big waves breaking. I would say, if I look back at it, they were probably 3-foot waves. But to a beginner, a 3-foot wave is kind of sizable when you're surfing like little ripples.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And so a bigger wave came through, and I was right in position for it, but I was really scared because, a 3-foot wave has a little drop to it. And I wasn't very good at making drops and stuff yet. I was just used to surfing little white water. And so I just asked Duke, I'm like, Duke, will you help me get on this wave? And I get the wave. I get down the face. I still don't know how I did it to this day. Truthfully, don't know how it happened. But I stood up on the face of this, 3-foot wave, which to me was enormous at the time. To everyone else, it's a 3-foot wave.
Yeah.
And here I am surfing it. And I felt this, I felt Duke's presence. I don't know how else to put this. And I got goosebumps all over my body. I mean, I was covered head to toe, and the wave starts dying. And I was just happy to be on that wave. But then all of the sudden, on my back left shoulder, I feel Duke start to push me. And I was pushed. I literally, like, physically was moved. My body was moved. And I was pushed into the reform of this wave. And the wave reformed. And I rode the wave all the way to the sand from the outer break of Publix.
It's just, I have such a huge smile on my face. Nobody can see me, but
like,
oh my gosh.
It is still to this day one of the most metaphysical, out of left field experiences I have ever had. And my skeg hit the sand. I got off my surfboard, tears streaming down my face. And I just kept saying, "Happy birthday, Duke! I did it!" I looked like an absolute psychopath on the beach, and I know I did, but no one else knew.
Yeah.
That like I just had that experience, and I've never had anything like that happen since, you know. But that was probably one of the most profound waves of my entire life, and I will never forget it. I mean, I will take that to my grave. Like,
that's beautiful. Oh,
I just felt he was still out there, and he pushed me on a wave. And I just kind of, even when I think back on it, I'm like, this is something Duke would have done when he was alive. You know, he would have done something like that to bring someone joy on a wave. And it didn't matter if you were a beginner or if you were amazing. Like that Duke spirit would have, you know, done something like that.
That's incredible. I love it. That was a good favorite wave story. Have you seen The Waterman? The movie?
I didn't get to see it.
I think it's going to come back around because it's playing at the Aloha Theater here. So look for it. It may be somewhere on Oahu. You'll really want to see it. You'll really want to see it.
I do want to see it. I've been reading the book, The Waterman, and I have the Audible version. And man, that story is remarkable. If anyone wants to learn about Duke Kahanamoku, you know, get the book, his biography, The Waterman. I
want to read the book too to get the rest of it. But in the movie, you'll hear his voice. You'll hear his voice quite a lot. And it's really interesting. I'm just not going to say anything else. It's very interesting. The timbre of it, what his accent sounds like, which was very closer to old, you know, when Old Hawaiian was still spoken. So really, and very, very painful too, to watch. Like he was, like you can feel his spirit just exactly as you say, but also how he was, you know, tokenized and misused, you know, and colonization that started and continued. But all of that, which of course is so important for people to understand, but getting to see him physically move and hear his voice, and they do a lot of enactments that aren't him, but you get to see him and you get to hear his voice. It was so unbelievable. And I am embarrassed to say all these years I lived in Hawaii, I didn't really know his story. Like I sort of knew his story. So it was really important.
Most people don't. I mean, unless you make a concentrated and intentional effort to learn anything about the past, really. Doesn't matter if it's about Hawaii or a president of the United States. Like, unless you're making a concentrated effort to learn about someone or something, you won't know. But that movie looks absolutely incredible. And you know, another one I just saw that I was sobbing uncontrollably in the movie theater. It's in theaters right now. It's called Big Wave Guardians. It's about the Kaolanas. It's about Eddie Aikau. It's about all of the legendary lifeguards around the Hawaiian Islands that changed the world. Big Wave Guardians. Big Wave Guardians. It's in movie theaters right now. And I'm telling you, you will sit through that, you'll watch it, and it will make you melt. But it is such a powerful film.
That sounds amazing. I'm so, you know, being surrounded by the kind of watermen, waterwomen that we're surrounded with in Hawaii, it's so humbling. And, you know, having had the kind of wipeouts. I mean, I had my real ocean initiation. Actually, I went on a trip when I was in high school so I lived in California, and I think I was on the swim team briefly. So I was a good swimmer. I thought I knew about the ocean, blah, blah, blah. I was with other people on the swim team, and we went out at Makapu. And, you know, there's the big sign saying, warning, dangerous surf. And we're like, ha, 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 we're from California. Anyways, this was, you know, a long time ago. So we swim out I'd have to see it again. I only have it in my memory now, but people mostly were bodyboarding, and the break is way out there. And you need the kind of wave that breaks there, had never seen anything like it. It's like it forms and reforms, and it's a big foam ball. And of course, you need a bodyboard and fins. Like you could never catch anything just as body surfing, but we thought we could. So we go out there, and it's just a disaster. And the guys were not very nice to us. Like they were like, "Oh, it's a bunch of howling girls."
Oh yeah, no, that's
just
a local break.
Whatever. This was in 1981, right? So they're just looking at us like, "Whatever, chicks," and ignoring us. And then we finally realized, okay, we better go in. So we swim, and it's a long way in, and we're trying to come in, and the waves are huge. It's big shore break. And, we didn't notice this when we went out, and maybe the tide had dropped or it built swell, who knows? But anyways, we're trying to get in, and these things are sucking up and slamming down. One girl ended up swimming all the way to the end of the cove and going in. But I remember swimming. I could not get in. I couldn't get the timing in. I just kept going. And finally, I almost made it onto the sand. And I remember standing up, and then the water sucking out, to my ankles. And then I turned around, and here's this massive thing slams me into the ground, grinds me, face. And and another one, I got so pounded and, came out of that water. And that was like, I was humbled. I was forever humbled. And I understood that Hawaii was nothing like anywhere else. And I'm sure Fiji and, I'm sure other tropical waves are that terrifying, but so the skill that these people have to navigate, it's just, Clark Little's photography. Are you kidding me?
I don't actually understand how
so these people, they're incredible. It's just, it's so mind blowing. So I love it. Anyways, we keep getting excited about that, or I do. So,
sorry.
I know. It's like, but it's so fun. And I want you to share a little bit about this. Gosh, I feel like there's so much we could talk about. But I really loved your story when we were talking. You were talking about surfing in places where people have literally surfed every day of their lives for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. This is something that many of us will never experience, really. So I loved kind of your story about humility and, how you approach being in that lineup, and anything you want to share about that experience. And any advice you have, in a way, for, how to enter such a place. Just what you can share about that, because to me, that was so powerful.
Yeah. So, in Hawaii in particular, right, surfing is over 1,000 years old, and it's generational. And so people surf their entire lives at specific breaks all across the Hawaiian Islands. And Waikiki is no exception. I think a lot of people think Waikiki is some kind of exception because of all of the tourism that is present in the South Shore, with, people trying surfing for the first time. But really and truly, there are people at Queens, canoes, bowls, all the way around. You can circumvent all of Oahu, and this keeps going down the Hawaiian Island chains, that have been in the ocean since they were children. Mm-hmm. And we're talking 1, 2, 3 years old. And now they're in their 60s and 70s, and they only surf one break their whole life. That's their break. They don't go anywhere else when it gets bad or when it gets big or small. That's their break. And they surf that day in and day out until they are no longer with us. And Makaha is very much like this as well. Makaha is notorious for people that have surfed there their entire life, and North Shore too, right? But this is really anywhere in Hawaii. So there is so much wisdom within these individuals, and some of them are harsher than others. Some of them are more welcoming and gentler and more compassionate. But regardless of their personality and disposition, you have to just sit back for a moment and imagine how much of the ocean they've witnessed.
I love that.
They've literally watched the coastlines change. They've watched, climate change. They've watched, I'm sure when they started surfing, there were still lots of sharks in the water, like there is in Tahiti today, but no longer in Hawaii. These individuals have probably seen so much. I mean, they have seen children that were born that are now in their 50s, right? That they probably trained to become surfers. And then however many generations that have come after them. I mean, they've probably seen 5 generations, maybe even 6 generations of surfers within their lifetime, within their single break. And God knows how many tourists and how many sets. And it's really just an opportunity to marvel at someone with that level of wisdom and expertise. And like I
love
said,
this so much. This is why I really wanted you to bring it up, because you have this way of bringing this whole breadth to I can't come up with the words. It's like the glory. It's not a sport. It's so much more, but like just that embodiment of exactly what you said. Just imagine what they've seen, and a place where we can maybe take a breath to respect that too. We're in such a hurry to live, and we are not culturally as Americans ones that sit back and say, oh, let us appreciate the wisdom of the elders, So, it's a really powerful thing to just, I love your word, marvel, to sit back and marvel without it being about us, without it being about what they think about us or accept us or don't accept us, but literally, like you said, just take it in, like, wow, this person.
I really think these individuals are the definition of extraordinary. I mean, they will go out in every condition, in every state of mind, in every state of their body. And the amount of lives that they've impacted, the amount of just, I don't even know how to put it. I mean, you think about how much wisdom and information and intelligence their eyes have absorbed through watching the ocean that many years within a human lifetime. I mean, they understand things about the ocean that they probably can't even articulate verbally. I mean, these are just things that their body and their mind have absorbed by being in nature so long. And so when you go to these places and you see these older aunties and uncles sitting in the lineup, and maybe they do have poor attitudes or they're a little bit harsher, really take a moment to sit back and say, we haven't done in a single decade what they have managed to do in a lifetime. I have done nothing every single day except breathe, sleep, and eat for a decade of my life every day. I mean, these individuals, I'm telling you, the level of commitment is incredible. And you can see the story through their skin, through their eyes, through their muscles. You can literally see the story of the ocean written on them.
That's and so beautiful.
It's remarkable. So even if there's an individual like that, what you have to understand, especially if you don't live here and you're coming for the first time, if that individual tells you something, it's in your best interest to listen to them. And if you don't understand what they're trying to communicate with you, because honestly, you may not have the capacity to understand something they're saying. Like if you've not been in the water before, like me, coming from landlocked states, ask for clarity, ask for help, ask where you can be pointed to. But the best thing you can do if you have already kind of entered the foray of surfing, when you're going to new breaks that are very established, without, just by yourself, is to bring somebody with you to introduce you to the culture of that particular lineup, because every lineup around the world has a different culture.
So bring somebody from that lineup, not, I was going to say, not necessarily don't bring a friend necessarily. No. And definitely don't bring a couple of friends.
Definitely.
But
no, this is something that this is like it. You got to think of this almost as entering a temple. All right. Like a real sacred space somewhere far away from what you've known your whole life. Like if you were to go to the top of a mountain somewhere and an entire culture said, this is one of our sacred places, you would not just waltz in there and do whatever the hell you wanted to do. You would have a sense of reverence for that, because if you don't have a sense of reverence, you have dismissed like 1,000 years worth of history and significance within that singular moment that a lot of people's consciousness have contributed to making a sacred space and making a protected area, right? So you have to think about it like that. You are entering a temple, and every surf break is its own temple, especially in the Hawaiian Islands.
Yeah.
And so when you go to a place like that's considered very significant within a culture with to all different races and types of people, it doesn't, regardless, you need a guide, you need someone to show you the way into that temple, into that space, so that you understand the protocol, you understand the significance of where you are, and then you begin to learn how to respect and uphold the traditions of that particular break and who these individuals are and why they deserve the respect that they get. And I think one of the best things that you can do is simply sit next to these individuals. A lot of times we're so concentrated on trying to prove ourselves. And I know, and it might even be subconscious. Like this may not be in the front of your mind where you're thinking, I need to prove myself today.
Right.
That particular thought may not be in your brain, but your body and your actions are communicating. You're trying to prove yourself. You want to be accepted. You want validation. And sometimes the best way you can achieve that, especially in a surfing community, is by simply being patient and sitting and observing next to these very important and gifted and beautiful people that have done this for decades of their lives. And it's such a privilege to be able to meet these individuals across Hawaii. And even if one of them yells at you, it's like, wow, I just got yelled at by a legend. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm at least even in a situation where that person spoke to me.
Right.
You know what I'm
funny.
saying?
Yeah. That's funny.
And I'm not saying don't go out of your way to piss anybody off, but like if you accidentally do something, these are real great opportunities for you to sit back and to reflect, like, I don't need to prove myself. I don't need to go out there and try to show everyone that I quote unquote know how to surf. It's really an opportunity to take that role of the observer and sit and watch and listen to the individuals of these breaks and their lives and who they're talking to and what that culture is like there. And the more
great advice. Yeah.
The more you can perfect that and do that and ask questions that are thoughtful, I think, the better surfer you become. You learn a lot through surfing through your eyes. And I know that sounds really weird to say, but you do. You learn a lot about surfing through your eyes. You have to watch a lot. You have to watch the ocean. You have to watch other surfers, and how all of it is interacting with each other. It's its own little solar system.
I love this patience that you bring to it, or this willingness to be a student, to not be in such a hurry about it in a way. And I'm sure sometimes that's not perfect when you're in the water,
Absolutely,
sure you have your moments.
Not.
We all have our moments. I'm going to speak for you of being a little greedy or a little hungry or something, where you lose that. But overall, the energy you're bringing to it and the reminder to be, because there's a piece where you have to learn a certain amount of aggression is maybe the wrong word, but it's kind of,
no, I think that is the right word.
You got to have some of that, but there's a time and a place for it. And, so it's weighing all of the situations. And yeah, it's a really complex world out there. I mean, it is so fascinating. It's such a fascinating world. And the people that really grow up in it just probably don't speak of it as much because it's simpler terms for them. They went through the pecking order in a different way. My daughter's father is actually from Makaha. And, he talks about, when, and it's also changed over time. Like when he was young, right, Groms just didn't get waves, like period. The uncles would never let the Groms on waves. I mean, that was something you earned, like took a long time. There's a very clear pecking order. Now Groms definitely get in there more. And there's a whole thing going on about whether the Groms are learning enough respect and whether there's enough enforcing. And there's a whole other piece. But so they've got a whole journey of their own. It's a totally different thing when you come in as an adult and you think you're going out with the dolphins and you're going to be leaping together. And, oh my gosh, one of the most complex social systems you've ever been involved in with unspoken rules and some that get spoken, some that get yelled at you, some that are wrong, some that are correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, my last podcast with Mackenzie, who's a really good surfer from here, who started as an adult at 21 and just really put in her time and really has become accomplished. But we talked a lot about those little unspoken rules, in the lineup and whose wave it really is if you paddle for it. And, you can surf your whole life and still be learning all this stuff. But what I really love is this presence that you've brought to this whole concept, particularly in these established breaks. And it's really easy to not understand that every break has its culture. It's really easy to, and not every break has as rich or as kind a culture or whatever, so that's true. Some breaks are really ruled by weekend warriors, in different parts of the country. So that's a different energy. But there's just something really awesome in what you said and sort of what you're bringing to the whole energy of it that I really appreciate. And I can feel in just how you approach all of it. So, okay, I'm going to ask you one last question because we've been talking a while. We love to talk. So I want to ask you just really in particular, any ninja tricks you have for women who, maybe have had in their minds, I can't do this physically. I'm either, not strong enough or, I'm heavier than the models look. Like any ninja tricks you have physically to anything your instructors taught you to sort of, just cut through that stuff. And what's really helped you?
I think the greatest lesson I learned when I was going through the worst of it was to keep showing up. I know it's almost too simple of advice. It really sounds like, oh God, I didn't get anything out of that. But if you really stop and think about it, all those voices in your head, their whole purpose is to try to get you to stop. And if you keep showing up, those voices don't win.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. And I'm telling you, it sounds simple. The execution of it will be a fight. You're going to have to determine how much you want to do this. And look, there's no right or wrong answers in surfing. It's not black and white. And surfing in the ocean will teach you that in some of the harshest ways. It's nothing in life is black and white. You are in a living, moving, multifaceted body of water. This is its own entity within nature. It has its own set of rules and physics, and it will really blow you open in a lot of different ways, not in positive ways either. And you're going to have to decide for yourself, do I really want this? And like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's only you continuing to show up or not showing up. And that's what's going to determine.
If you feel the call, then the commitment to show up is what you want. If it turns out that you really are like, but you'll know. So if it's the negative voices, maybe that's the thing. If it's negative voices telling you not to do it, like you recognize that chatter, that's you want to work through. But if it's like, no, I really don't like this very much, then that's a different story.
If you're absolutely miserable trying to surf, I'm not saying that won't happen. It's going to happen. Okay. There are going to be some days where you hit the water and it's F this and F that, and I'm done. That's coming your way if you're a surfer. Sorry to break it to you. But I mean, if you're just having an absolutely miserable time in the water, get out and don't do it. That's not where your joy is. Okay. I'm sorry to break it to you. You got to go find something else. But if you're still, if you're experiencing incredible joy and happiness and freedom and these positive feelings, but then, you get insecure because it's difficult to do. And then you get this internal chatter. That is what I'm telling you to push past.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you to stay in pursuit of the bliss. And it's not a paved road. Okay. It's not paved. You're going to have to hike.
It's a bumpy ride. There's a lot of coral. There's a lot of rocks. I'll add one thing. It's always 2 more paddles than you think you need. 2 more paddles.
See, I'm actually learning the exact opposite
right now. Oh, really? Oh, okay. We'll strike that.
Not really though. So my big thing, and this is going to it may or may not help a lot of people, but growing up a survivor of child abuse and just overall having a lot of trauma that's built up over a lifetime, I operate at a high state of just tension almost all the time. And you can kind of see it. I'm very type A. You can even see it really in my surfing. If you pay attention, you know what you're looking for. And one of the things I'm learning right now is how to chill the fuck out. Excuse my language, but really chill out. And I'm learning the no paddle entry right now.
Well, that is its own thing. That's true. That is its own thing. And that's all about timing. So that's very cool. But I love that you brought it up because it isn't always effort. You know, it isn't effort. I just happen to see a lot of people stop 2 paddles short when they almost have the wave. But that's in dialing in your timing and your placement. So, you know, that's a whole other piece. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much. I know we could clearly talk for hours. This is so much fun, but I really appreciate you. So, okay, tell everybody where to find you, and I'll put it in the notes too.
Super easy. Curvy Surfer Girl. It's on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm primarily on TikTok and Instagram, and you can always DM me, leave a comment. I check everything. And if you need something, all of my contact details are in my bio.
And when is the Jolin, is the clothing line, is it already out, or what's happening with that?
So we just, I'm a design consultant now for them. And we just launched 3 styles in a 3XL that I consulted to help make plus size and diverse friendly. So those are out, those 3 styles. It's the Nadia bottoms and the Astor and Carmen surf tops. Okay, so awesome. You can buy those right now. My collection will be launching next spring. So spring of 2023, and it's going to be remarkable. We have been putting so much work into it. It's beautiful. It's functional. I think your mind's going to be blown.
I can't wait to see it. Amazing. So exciting. So everyone, make sure you follow her. I'll have to find you on TikTok. I always forget about TikTok, but my daughter reminds me. So thank you again. It was so much fun talking with you. And,
absolutely.